Well, this is awkward. Remember last Sunday when I said that was my last video sermon ever? Guess that's not the first time. The pandemic has proven me wrong about something. Long story short, I have some children with cold symptoms that are making it inadvisable for me to be with you in person today. Again. Which is really disappointing. I had some great opening lines prepared about how weird it is to be preaching to real live people again, how much better you all look in person than you did on your Zoom screens, all that good stuff. But no, you are there and I'm here, or maybe I'm here now and you are here later. Anyway, we are not together. This is not what I wanted today to be. But life goes on. A classic from the beginnings of contemporary worship music back in the 1980s. Sing along with me if you know this one. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because we're given Jesus Christ the Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what our God has done for us. Give thanks. Give thanks. What does it mean to have a grateful heart? I know there is so much to be grateful for on a day like today, especially for those of you enjoying the service at church for the first time in forever. There's the reunion with friends, the warm feelings we get of community. I can imagine myself tearing up if I were there. The incredible gift of vaccines that make it relatively safe for us to gather like this. The amazing dedication of so many people in our community and around the world working together to keep everything functioning so that we can continue with life. I'm also grateful for my health and the health of my family throughout this pandemic. I don't take that for granted anymore. And I'm also grateful for the relative health of this church community. Throughout the pandemic, to my knowledge, we have not had anyone from this church in the hospital due to COVID. No one in our church has died from the virus. That's pretty amazing. Back in 2020, I was working out pandemic funeral sermons in my head. It seemed like an inevitability that our church would lose some people from this thing. But we haven't so far. We have been kept safe. We have kept each other safe thus far. Thanks be to God. And yet, can you feel the tension that comes with gratitude? Every one of those things that I listed, these things that I'm grateful for, all come with a shadow side. Some of our friends are here this morning, some are not. Neither am I, apparently. Some of the people who made up this church community in March 2020 aren't with us anymore. Some of them have been missing for a while now. Will we see them again? We don't know. Also, it's not entirely safe for us to gather. There still is this long list of do's and don'ts. There's still a fog of caution and uncertainty that we're swimming in. We have all these amazing workers, but some of the amazing workers keeping our world going are taken advantage of, forced to work in unsafe circumstances. Some of them are now even facing hostility just for doing their jobs. Then there's my health. Good so far, could change tomorrow. My family has been safe so far, but who knows? And that statement depends on how I draw that circle of family. My grandpa died with COVID in March or May of 2020. I'm not grateful for that. Similar situation with our church. Our people have been hospitalized. Our people have died. Maybe not from COVID, but death is death. Suffering is suffering. We couldn't be there to bring a smile to a hospital bed, to say final goodbyes, to support each other in grief. And so I am grateful, but sorry if I'm being a downer on a day so many of us have been looking forward to for a very long time. But that is how I feel. I am grateful, and I feel sadness and anger and fear and guilt. Does my gratitude still count if it is messy and complicated? One of my favorite images from the Old Testament is from the book of Ezra. The Jews had been banished from their homeland by the empire of Babylon. But after 70 years, 2 generations in exile, the political winds shifted and some of the refugees began returning to their homeland, to Jerusalem. They were led by a priest named Ezra. God helps. And they needed that divine assistance. They returned to a city with broken walls, ruined homes. The beautiful temple built by Solomon had been destroyed entirely. So the refugees got work rebuilding. In the second year of their return, they appointed work crews to begin rebuilding the temple. They didn't have the resources to rebuild it in all of the glory of Solomon, but they made a beginning, a new start. When they had laid the foundations of the new temple, they gathered in that space. They surrounded the altar, and they had a service of dedication. In the middle of a construction site, surrounded by the ruins of what might have been, they prayed those same words that we did in our scripture reading from Psalm 118. Give thanks to our God, for she is good. Her love endures forever. A psalm of thanksgiving, one that traditionally was sung as a processional into that sanctuary. The sanctuary didn't exist yet. Their hard work had barely begun. Their survival was not guaranteed. And yet they gave thanks. And their service of thanksgiving was also complicated by the presence of grief and regret. The people joined in with shouts of praise to God as the foundation of the house of Yahweh was being laid. Many of the older priests and Levites and heads of families who had seen the original temple cried openly at seeing the new foundation laid. Many more cried out for joy, and the cries of joy and the cries of sorrow were so mingled that no one could distinguish between them, and the din of the cries could be heard from far away. That's the image that I love. The tears of sorrow and the tears of joy blended together, so mixed up that no one could tell where the heartache ended and the gratitude began. That story reminds me of another story, one that was often told by the older German congregation at First Mennonite Church in Vancouver. Many of them were of the generation of Mennonites born in Soviet Russia, persecuted and expelled by the Soviets during World War II. One faithful Oma would get up in church about once a year to tell the story of that escape from Soviet-controlled East Germany. She was a young woman in 1947 in a group of 1,000 Mennonite refugees trying to make their way from East Germany to a boat in West Germany, chartered to take them to Paraguay. But they were stuck in Berlin. They needed permission from the Soviets to get across the border. And the Soviets were not exactly friendly to a bunch of German-speaking Russian Mennonites. So the Soviets were delaying everything, and no one was sure if they were ever going to be allowed to leave. So the boat on the coast of Germany was threatening to leave without them. The Mennonite leaders negotiated, give us one more day to get these refugees here from Berlin. That night, they got word that there was a train with approval to take them across the border, leaving in just 1 hour. So they had to be quiet because they weren't sure how official everything was, and they didn't want to attract attention from the Soviets. So you can imagine the chaos. They packed all of their stuff from their refugee camp. They got onto army trucks that took them to a train controlled by the Americans. There were ambulances in the convoy. There were a bunch of the refugees were quite sick. And there was a pregnant woman who was in labor. One of the trucks got a flat tire on the way and blocked the whole procession for a while. But by midnight, they had all made it onto the train, and the train departed. And they still had to get past the Soviets at the border. So they reached the border, and the train stopped just a few meters away from safety, freedom. There was a gate across the tracks and big red stoplights. And they could see out the window as they were looking, there were these serious looking Soviet inspectors walking down the train with their heavy winter coats, checking into every car. No one knew what would happen when they got to the cars with the Mennonite refugees. This is the part of the story that Mrs. Jansen told so well at First Mennonite Church. Everyone was quiet. Everyone was praying. And before the inspectors reached the Mennonite cars, in their quiet, they heard a click. They saw the gate went up, the light turned green, the conductor hit the gas, and the train started rolling forward into British territory. As they traveled and knew that they were safe for this part of the journey, Mrs. Jansen described everybody singing together, as you can imagine a train car full of Mennonites would do. Nun danket alla Gott. Now thank we all our God. They had barely escaped. Many of them were quite ill. All of them were leaving loved ones behind. They had nothing with them but what they could carry. They were headed to a boat that still might leave without them, and if they made it, it would be a long, uncomfortable journey to Paraguay, where they would have to learn to be farmers in the middle of a jungle that they would soon call the Green Hell. They were not at the end of the story by any stretch. And right there in the middle of the mess, they sang, "Now thank we all our God." Gratitude does not exist only in perfect conditions, separate from the uncertainties and losses of life. Gratitude exists in context of the larger story, as part of the whole. It's not gratitude after, it's gratitude with, gratitude alongside everything else. That's the story of God's people, from the ancient Jews to the Russian Mennonites to this gathering of gratitude in the ongoing pandemic. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus. 1 Thessalonians 5. It could also be translated, in wholeness, give thanks. There is a place for gratitude in everything. And the act of gratitude shifts our perspective to be able to see the whole, to appreciate and live in the unity and integrity and shalom of it all. That is the will of God, bringing the whole thing together. And that is the Holy One the song points us toward, the Sacred One, the creative Spirit giving birth to the whole thing. That is Jesus Christ, as Richard Rohr puts it, the universal Christ, the cosmic Christ, the flow, the oneness connecting creation with Creator from the beginning. That is what it means to say, when I am weak, then I am strong, and when I am poor, then I am rich. To recognize that strength and vulnerability are intimately connected, that poverty and wealth, emptiness and fullness, desire and fulfillment are both essential in the wholeness of life. It turns out what I thought was a fluffy worship song is actually pretty deep. Those are awfully difficult concepts to wrap our heads around, for sure. And so the practice of gratitude is one concrete way to orient ourselves to that truth in faith, whether we understand it or not, from one moment to the next. So, this pandemic has been, still is, hard and fearful and confusing and filled with loss. Next Sunday, we will name and lament those hardships together. And today, we will name and celebrate the gifts of the pandemic. For there is goodness here in the flow of life that we Christians name as the gift of the Holy One. In a minute, Eileen will lead us in a ritual of candle lighting, and you'll be invited to share one or two things that you are grateful for today. That could be something from the past year since we were together, or it could be whatever it is that comes to mind today, big or small. Gratitude is the path towards wholeness. Let's sing that song together once more. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because we're given Jesus Christ the Son. Repeat that. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because we're given Jesus Christ the Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what our God has done for us. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what our God has done for us.